Hello, and welcome to Conversations with Reverend G. I am Reverend Grenetta Mason, aka Reverend G, and I'm here every Monday night live on WEMS Radio. We're live on Facebook, we're live on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. Each week, I have special guests that we come together and we talk about life, we talk about love, we talk about spirituality. And we talk about spirituality from a practical point of view. How does it support you in your everyday life? What go to practices do you have in your own spiritual toolkit? I talk about the spiritual toolkit that we can all create with our own personal practices that work for us. And so we could just go to that toolkit if we need clarity, if we need to be uplifted, if we're sad. There's so much going on now that there are times when, even for me, I've been reaching into my toolkit a lot because there's so many ups and downs and so much uncertainty. And my goal is to always access the joy that's available to me. And I'd like to support you in accessing that joy that's available to you and being able to find clarity, support, reduce your stress. And one of the ways I think that works is using your spiritual practices. And my guests, we talk about those spiritual practices, we talk about resources, and our goal is to touch, move, and inspire you to be your best self. And I always say my goal is to support you in living your best life in joy with grace and ease. And you can find me every day on Facebook and on Instagram. I'm on Facebook as Reverend Grenetta Mason, and I'm on Instagram as Rev Grenetta. And I post inspirational messages to support you through to the day, to support you in finding that moment to access joy. Tonight, I am so excited to have Elizabeth Reyes as my guest. Elizabeth is an HR professional and she's a transformational coach. So, welcome, Ellie.
Hello, hello, hello. Great evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yes, I was excited to have you. I haven't spoken to you in a while. We've coached together at Momentum, and I talk about momentum on here all the time, right?
hmm
So, yeah, well, maybe we could start with you talking about your experience in momentum and as a transformational coach.
Certainly. So I joined Momentum back in 2014. I was looking to elevate my financial independence at the time. And I was looking also to sort of get to the next level. Wasn't really sure what that looked like, but I knew in the career sector, I was basically looking to step up where I was at. I had been in the HR field since I had graduated, always in admin jobs, but certainly doing a lot more than admin work. So I had the experience, but not the title. And so I joined Momentum to sort of take a look at how can I make connections, do networking. And as you know, from doing the work and being involved, got so much more out of it. And
Mhm,
so that was really the catalyst for me to be able to tap into my power and figure out how to really get the results that I needed. I've always had goals, I've always had ideas, but never really implemented them. So that
mhm,
was the toolkit that I got with Momentum to be able to first start to elevate my role. So I was able to get results in the income sector.
mhm,
And that really gave me the motivation to continue exploring other areas regarding relationship, health, and well being, and so forth. But that was really what I would say the foundation of my trajectory to do that leap from admin work and
mhm,
getting paid admin level to really honing into my skills and my experience and get paid what I'm worth, and knowing that I have the independence, the power, and the freedom to choose what organizations I go to, how long I stay, what are the type of roles that I have, and being able to translate that directly into my regular career, I was able to get more involved with the organization and help other people do the same. So making sure that they understand what they're able to accomplish and achieve if they put in the work, and also the faith, right? So
Yeah.
talk a lot about faith and spirituality, and it's really being able to marry both of them together. It's
Mhm.
that always a nice have, but then it's the action behind it and how to get there.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean that's a great. You could do a commercial for momentum, right? And as we, I mean, and what I love about it is when we talk about our experiences, and we've all had different experiences through our momentum journey, but they've always been positive and on the same level. And I always think because we get so much out of it, we want to share with others. We want others to come,
Yes.
you know. So it's always about come get this too, right? You know, like so good, right?
Yes.
So it's a continuous push for other people because it supports them, as you said. And what's my next level? And I loved it too that, like you said, you have the goals, the ideas, and sometimes we wonder, so what's in the way? But it supports us in stepping out of that, you know? I say sometimes we live in worry, doubt, and fear. And
Mm-hmm.
it supports us in, you know, like, okay, acknowledge the fear, but then don't let the fear hold you down, right?
Right,
Acknowledge the
exactly.
worry, but then just step around that. What can we do to support, like acknowledging what's holding us back and
Mm-hmm.
then like just moving through it anyway, right?
Exactly. And I think for me, a pivotal moment was when my role got eliminated back in 2009. And I had given so much to this organization and this company, and I couldn't really fathom the idea of not having a job. Where was I going to go next? I really saw myself with them, but within that I also realized that I actually was okay when I got the news,
Mhm,
although I didn't know what was coming. And that goes back to walking by faith.
mhm,
And I have always had a deep relationship with God, always had a deep relationship in my faith, although it might look different for different people.
mhm,
So I'm not necessarily the church goer all the time,
mhm,
but I have my conversations with my higher being, my higher power. And I knew that no matter what, I had always been blessed and I will always be blessed. And so I took that as an opportunity to see it as an opening door. So
mhm,
perhaps this is not where God wanted me to be, and just trusting that whatever may come next is where I'm meant to be. And ever since that particular experience,
mhm,
it has given me a freedom in the jobs that I've had, not being attached to companies or corporations, and really knowing that it's really you and your branding. You
mhm,
know what you're worth, you know the experience that you bring to the table. And so I always knew that I had a great background, and no matter where I go, I'm adaptable. I'm able to land where I land and make it work. And
mhm,
so I just took it with stride. Yes to the severance money, yes to the 2 months off, and then
mhm,
just go after what I really wanted to do. Instead of just allowing positions to come to me, I was
mhm,
very intentional as to where I wanted my trajectory and my career to go. So I do feel that they go hand in hand.
mhm,
You have to ground yourself first, and believe in what you have and what you have to offer, and visualize where you want to go, and then
mhm.
it's the action plan behind it to put it into practice, so to speak.
Yeah, it's like I say inspired action, right?
Yes.
And so, because I have this thing about how much do we do a lot of doing, but then we have to really get to being. And if we can master the being part, then we'll know the inspired action that we have to
Mm-hmm.
take, right? And I know what's interesting is talk about how you say you were always an admin. So, what were some of the challenges and successes that you can share going from being an admin, you know, and doing the work and seeing all the people get promoted that had the jobs? How did you make that transition? And what were some of your challenges in doing that?
And so some of the positive things about being an admin and being in admin roles is that you actually get to do the nitty-gritty, right? You
Mhm,
get to understand processes, you get to understand where the missing gaps are, you're sort of connecting the dots where it might be missing. And you also get to learn from the leaders that you're supporting. So I've had a great privilege to work with amazing people in all the companies that I've been at, where I've been able to learn from them, emulate what I love about them, what I didn't like so much, sort of like be on the lookout on how could we improve that. And so being able to hone in on all those skills, I had a great background doing basically all that you can think of from A to Z.
Mhm.
But then when promotions came around, when new opportunities came around, you were sort of overlooked because then you were pigeonholed in that particular skill set.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so for me, the successes that I had was networking, really
Mhm.
going out there and creating opportunities for myself. Whenever there was an event HR related, I would sign up and volunteer and go. I was able to, on my own, look into my certification and get into that particular realm of professionally being certified within my field, even though at the time I might have not had the titles that they wanted, but
Mhm.
I certainly had the years of experience. I had the educational background, having a Bachelor of Science with a concentration in human resources. So I figured, let me just get the certification, learn more, learn the strategic part of it. And that really did help when I send my resumes out. That was definitely one of the key desired and required skills in a lot of the different jobs that I saw. So I
Mhm.
think that getting that certification really helped, and being intentional about the connections that you make, finding those mentors. Sometimes
Mhm.
people do that on their own. Other times you have to create the opportunities. And it doesn't have to be a formal thing. It could just be like, hey, I really like how you do this. Or can you teach me more about that? And I've had so many great mentors throughout my career, whether they may have identified themselves as that or not. Maybe they didn't know, but I knew. Um,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that really helped me to know, specifically in HR, it's always been wearing the client service hat. So
Mhm.
the managers are my client. What is the client service that I'm supporting them with? What is the experience I want them to have?
Mhm.
And I think that really helped me as I grew in my career to work, let's say, in financial banks. So there's always a certain demeanor that you need to have, a certain white glove service that you need to provide. And I took that very early on in my career, and that really has helped me to excel, as
Mhm.
well as relationship building. So yes, I am an outgoing person, but clearly you cannot be the same outgoing person outside of work than you are at work.
Mhm.
Yes, be authentic, but clearly you have different parameters. And so the relationship building has always been another key strength of mine, even to this day. So being
Mhm.
able to relate to people, being able to make them feel comfortable, having
Mhm.
that balance of personal and professional has definitely allowed me to create a lot of great opportunities and be able to build rapport quickly with my client groups.
Mhm.
Even if I have never met them in person, now we do a lot of virtual. So I
Mhm.
work with a lot of the European countries,
Mhm.
and being able to, what I would say is really have your brand talk for you. So yes, you could say that you do this, but once they get to know you, what do they associate with you? So for
Mhm.
me, thinking even back when I was an admin, is what is the experience that I want people to have of me, have that credibility, and that has always stayed ingrained with me. Just
Mhm.
building my credibility and ensuring that what I deliver matches with integrity what I've set forth to be the experience that I have. And so it's great because it's been years since I've spoken to some people, some of my
Mhm.
bosses, old colleagues, but
Mhm.
because of the work that I did, because of the deliverance that I was able to do in the different works, the different projects, regardless of what that was, whether it was admin level or not, that speaks volume. And so when you reach out to people to ask for a favor or to touch base, I think
Mhm.
that that really does carry on to be able to say, yes, I know her. Oh, yeah, she's great. Oh, I would
Mhm.
definitely see her there. So that's how you create a name for yourself.
Mhm. That's great. That's great to see how you worked from the admin level and moved up, and it's good to see and hear those stories because some people don't have that opportunity or don't even understand how to move from that position to another position. So it's always great to see examples of people who are, making those changes, right? Now, today, as a global business and what is it? A global HR business partner,
Hmm.
right? You say you serve clients internationally, right?
Yes.
What roles do you play? I know you said you've had experience in talent management, all aspects of HR, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, describe what is the role of a business, a global business HR partner? And are you with one company or are you a consultant?
I'm with one company.
Oh, you're with the
So
company.
the HR department and the HR functions do vary by company.
Hmm.
But on a general level, the HR business partner is really someone that's working with key stakeholders on the strategy and the people plan for that particular business. So a common title that you might see is a HR journalist. So
Right.
typically a HR journalist might work on the day-to-day, the operational, so employee relations, they might do into a little bit of compensation. And depending on the company, some companies have specific departments for different functions. Others may have one or two people sort of doing everything.
Hmm.
So, as a HR business partner, you end up doing elevated strategic work and the people plan. So, you're probably working with the senior leaders. You're thinking of the strategy, how they could implement that and actually have initiatives to support those goals. So it's not just talking about it, but then how we're going to put that into practice. So my role as a global HR business partner, I get to work with specific key stakeholders at my company,
Hmm.
and we oversee two particular businesses on a worldwide level. So I'm working with a lot of my HR colleagues in the regional offices to make sure that we're implementing the strategies, the initiatives, if there's anything going on specifically to the businesses that I support, I'm the one working with them, and then just operationally figuring out where we need to make the connections, where I need to sort of step in and project manage that, or where do I step back and allow other people to do what they do because they're the experts on the ground. So in this particular company, I was actually in a regional role and just recently moved into the global role. So I was supporting managers globally before, but my oversight was only in the US. So now with this role, I actually have all the different global locations for my company for those businesses that I support.
Wow. You know, in the whole in the as I think about the whole HR world, and I think about the whole DEI initiatives, right? Um and I would like to hear from your perspective, being in HR for as many years as you've been in,
Hmm.
what have you seen is the shift? When now it's a buzzword, right? I say
Hmm.
a buzzword because it's a buzzword, right? So being in that field all these years, talk about the shift you've seen happen over time and our companies really being responsible. Are you seeing them really making change?
So again, it does vary by the company and what is their commitment, and a lot of that comes from the commitment from the executive board, the decision makers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could have programs, you could have buzzwords, but in reality, the story really is in the data and the metrics. And not all companies have visibility for that. So yes, you do have some confidentiality where you're not going to disclose demographics, but then others are a little bit more transparent in what is their story, what is their stand. And so over the years, and I've been in HR for almost 20 years at this point, and I would say when I first started, diversity was more about how to get the black people in the door. Literally,
Mm-hmm.
that's what it was about.
Mm-hmm.
um, and then it was more about, okay, we have Latinos and we have Latinx, which is more of a buzzword now. But if you think of diversity, diversity is not just race, and that's where I've seen the shift, where we are being more inclusive of the nationalities, of the ethnic groups, of people that may have disabilities. Neurodivergent is a new one that's really expanding now. When you also have identity where employees may feel that they identify with one gender or the other. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole broader spectrum of what diversity is. And so the shift have really been on where does the company want to position themselves, and then what are they doing to back that up. So what I've seen is a lot of programming, a lot of different things that may have only came around when there might have been, let's say, Black History Month, or
Mm-hmm.
when we have a particular holiday that they deem that they want to have a little bit of focus. So you have programming all month long and then nothing happens for the rest of the year. Where
Mhm.
now I think with all the different developments that have happened specifically after 2020, um, we've seen a lot more effort in being inclusive, using inclusive language, perhaps
Mhm.
having a diversity agenda that's all year round,
Mhm.
creating a lot of employee resource groups. But in reality, is not one size fits all. It really depends on what is the commitment of that particular company and where they want to go and to what level. And a lot of these initiatives oftentimes are driven by employees themselves. And the
Mhm.
key thing is really having the sponsorship, like I said, from the executive board, from the decision makers. Where I've seen success is whenever there's a sponsor from the business that has been able to back up those initiatives to make sure that it's not just a conversation that comes around once a year, and
Mhm.
that we are taking a look at that in the metrics and the hiring and the promotions, and where it really takes value.
Mhm.
But what I've seen is that moving the needle has taken time, and it
Mhm.
will continue to take time. And like you
Mhm.
said, it is a buzzword. A lot of people are throwing it around and they have statements. But what it really comes down to is, if you look at the metrics and the data, how many people you have
Mhm.
on the executive board, how many people you have
Mhm.
in decision making roles,
Mhm.
which is what we make the difference. So, yes, you can meet a quota, but where you're really going to make the impact is if you actually embed that in your day to day and your strategy overall throughout the calendar year, not just in particular times.
Mhm. Yeah, that is important. It's also I thought about it too. We had pre-COVID. There was a whole way of working and how people felt about work. Then we had COVID and we all went home, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now they're saying all come back.
Yes.
And people don't want to come back, right? People are like, really? If I did this whole job for 2 years remotely, why do I have to come back?
Mm-hmm.
So in your role, so what did you guys go fully remote? What kind of changes did your company make? Because my company is trying to have us all come back in, and everybody's like, the union is like, no, and then there is like resistance. And what about your company? And from an HR perspective, we talk about how COVID impacts people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the impact on all of us, and then the impact in the workforce.
So I'll talk about it in a more general sense,
Hmm.
because yes, I know what's going on in my company, but I'm also part of different networks, and
Hmm.
so this is definitely a hot topic that has been around for quite some time.
Hmm.
Going back to when COVID first hit,
Hmm.
as an HR professional, I could tell you we were not prepared. We've never gone through this, so in all the networks, it was like, what are we doing? Are you allowing people to work from home? Are you shutting down? Are you furloughing employees? And then it became the same thing. So we did that transition, and now when everything is sort of going back to the new normal, so we are opening the doors again, and some actually stayed open the whole time. I
Hmm.
think it goes back to, again, for companies, what is their policy? What is the level of flexibility that they're affording? I think hybrid is definitely here to stay. And for those that may not be familiar with the term, hybrid is essentially splitting the work between remote and in office. And
Hmm.
so I think that's really where my company specifically went in the hybrid model. But I know that in certain areas, there were employees that didn't have much flexibility. I also saw a shift in work from home policies that were a little bit more restrictive. Now they're a lot more flexible. We also had a lot of employees in different industries that decided to relocate and move right during the pandemic. And then
Hmm.
now those companies really had to look at the taxes and what are the implications of having people working elsewhere, especially when they didn't have, let's say, a legal entity in that particular state, or city. And so those are the different things that, from an employee perspective, like you said, they say, oh, I could work from here. I've been doing this remotely. Why can't I stay? But then on the back end, there are different things that needs to be looked at, not just you being able to do that. And you also think of employee morale and engagement, right? So
Hmm.
employee morale could be down if people feel like you're taking me away from my family, you're putting me at risk. And
Mhm.
for me specifically, I work with scientists, and
Mhm.
so they know what's going on. They know what the research is out there, right? Before it's
Mhm.
even printed, because that's what we do.
Mhm.
But then you also think of, how about from the environment that you want people to work in? So when they do
Yeah.
come in the office, so what does it
Mhm.
look like when you're coming in, but then there's no one around? Or
Mhm.
when you are coming in and then finally you have those employees that get to see their colleagues that they haven't seen in so long, and they have a good time. In a lot of the surveys that I've seen across the industry, a lot of the times employees often say that they do enjoy seeing their coworkers, but
Mhm.
then the downside is the commute time for people that have to mute for a long amount of time. So I
Mhm.
think it's all about balance. It's all about the culture for that specific company. And
Mhm.
clearly we've also seen, especially on the news, where you might have mandated employees to come back, but then the ruling has been that no, you cannot force or mandate people to return. But
Mhm.
it does vary by industry, right? So it could be a little bit different in a hospital setting in the medical field than it is for a private sector. And so in HR, a lot of times people think that it's a one size fits all, but it really comes down to the particular business that you're supporting and what is the approach that each company takes on different HR matters.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting too, because as you were talking, I thought about they talk about the mass shift to entrepreneurship. How
Mm-hmm.
many different people are starting their own businesses, and then you think about the impact on the whole corporate world and on the work world. And as you said, trying to get back, it will be a new normal to see where we go to. It's not about getting back, but how we evolve to our next level and what that all looks like for people and how comfortable they are. Because even now, it's interesting. We talk about how we live. There
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, so we said, oh, COVID, a lot of people died, a lot happened during COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you think, okay, we're gonna relax, and then the week they go like, oh no, put your mask back on, right? In New Jersey, and making all the kids wear masks, right? So
Right.
I think I always talk about too our level of mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Given everything that's been going on, so many people spoke up, which was really good about
Mm-hmm.
their depression. So many people spoke up about their mental problems, right? That there's a conversation, right? A
Mm-hmm.
real conversation around support for depression, around support for just mental health
Mm-hmm.
in general. And I was surprised. And as I always say, yeah, I used every tool I had, right?
Yeah.
They saying because we all are on that line, and it's like, what will push you over? How much stress, how much pressure, how much in life will put you on the line,
Mm-hmm.
People suffer from depression quietly. And that's why, like, the fact that now people are openly talking about it and seeking help and having other people be able to talk about it and look for help. So that's a positive part of the whole chaos, I call it, that we see now, right?
Yes,
That,
certainly. And I think, going back to what you just brought up, I think for one, with the return back into the office, people are also making decisions on what works best for them and their lifestyle and how they want to live. And so I do feel that the pandemic really put a lot in perspective.
mhm,
So maybe in the past, they might have put up with certain things that they no longer are accepting, or they're realizing, you know what, I want to invest my time and energy in this versus that. Shift of industry, shift of work, maybe spending more time at home or more time traveling, whatever that may be. And so I think that employees have taken a stand to say, you know what, fine, I'm asking for the flexibility, but if you don't give it to me, then I'm going elsewhere. And
right,
there has been a big shift in that. So now that has created a lot more opportunities, like I said, for remote working, for hybrid work. So it's not traditionally the 9 to 5, 5 days a week in the office. So on that front, that's good. And it has forced a lot of companies to sort of rethink of how they are utilizing space, how they are
Mhm.
leveraging the talent, and the deliverables that they've set, right? And then on the mental health front, that's definitely a win. There was a lot more resources, a lot more transparency, and sort of normalizing mental health and what that looks like in the workplace. I know, particularly for my company, we also created a network of support for parents because now schools were closing, daycares
Mhm.
were not available. And so we did shift some of our policies to provide additional support for our employees, whether it was extending the vacation time or
Mhm.
providing them with flexible work schedules that still allow them to do the work, but also make sure that they're there for their families. We
Mhm.
also had a bunch of different networks around pets. So you're sharing pictures of pets at home, which
Mhm.
for some people they find therapeutic. You also had different networks for different people to get together during that time that's still thriving post pandemic. I
Mhm.
just saw a post about a new group for parents, and they're having their first meeting this week at work. And
Mhm.
so I think that there have been a lot of different things that were put in place that have helped the employees have resilience. But I also think it is in your own right to also make sure that you know what your boundaries are and that
Mhm.
you know what you need for your own mental health. So it might not be what your company is offering.
Mhm.
So I think people should also be very proactive and be honest with themselves. So, what does the mental health and the support that you need looks like for you?
Mhm.
And if that's not being provided, where can you find it, or where can you create a resource to make that available? Which I
And
think
no
is
more
very, very
shame around it. Like, and
exciting.
no more shame around it. Just removing the whole stigma and the shame associated with it, right? It's really important. And then just having more resources available for people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I thought about and I worked in corporate America for a long time. And I used to hear this work life balance. You know, it's been this thread for a long time. And the
Yes.
whole 20 years you've been there, right? It's been like this whole thing about work life balance. But I really think that COVID had people realize, what does that really look like?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Being able to just be with family. A lot of people are forced into being with family and then appreciating being with family, appreciating work. And now, after you build these great family dynamics and relationships, what does that look like when we go back? So it's really about creating that work-life balance for people. And I think that's where we see them looking for the flexibility from companies, and where companies now have to think and step up. And as you said, people are like, if you can't give me what I want, I'll just go somewhere else. Not feeling,
Certainly.
yeah, they don't want to give up that whole balance kind of thing that came out of being home with family. I love being at home, but I also like the fact that I get to go back to work and deal with the people at work and be at work. But also, it's different still.
Mm-hmm.
Hasn't opened up yet because we're still like not sure about gathering. So we
Mm-hmm.
did gather for Christmas, and then we get a call, oh, you've been exposed to COVID, right? So then you're like, oh God, I don't want to gather with you people anymore, right?
Yes, yes, that certainly has been an ongoing conversation. And how do you deal with that? And how do you accommodate, right? So now at work, you could wear a mask if you want to, or if you don't, you don't. Um, and trust me, I was there for all those calls whenever we had a positive case, whenever we had to reach out to other employees to let them know. But I think over time it did become a norm. And I think now it's really on individual preferences what they like. And you'll be surprised. I do have some employees that have shared that they actually want to be back in the office. They might not have enough space at their house, or they might want to have a break in routine, or if they've been confined for 2 years, so they want to have a different type of scenery. So it does vary on a case by case basis. So I do think that the flexibility of being able to do hybrid is probably the best way that you can accommodate to do a happy compromise for all. So yes, you're coming into the office Um, you could work from home when needed. So being able to have the flexibility of both ends, because I do honestly believe, yes, video is great, technology is great, but there's nothing like the face-to-face interaction.
No, that's
Being in person, having those conversations that you probably won't have it on videos, or even the exhaustion of going from one video into the other, and no
right.
time in between. At least in the office, sometimes you sort of stop by someone's desk, you go to
Right.
the water cooler, maybe you might walk down the hall to talk to a different colleague, where a lot of the times you don't even have that in your own home.
Right, exactly. And this you said, like you said, a lot of times you don't have that at home. And for most people, community is really important, right? And think
Mm-hmm.
about the single people who were isolated for 2 years, where work was their community, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where, so there was a whole sense of loss there. Who are my people now? Because you go to work and you're with them all a long time, so they
Right.
become your community. And we talk about, because I always talk about momentum as a community, and that's one of the things that I appreciate about having a community of like-minded people. We think alike. You can meet people from momentum and you're on, right?
Yes, yes.
And I talked to a few people who were just alone,
Mm-hmm.
with no one, and they're excited to be back, to create community, to give back with people, because I'm sure that was pretty hard. I was fortunate enough that my husband was with me and I didn't have to be alone. And I have two dogs too. So all of that came together, during that time. So I think that community is important for people also, and being able to connect, and that does happen at work.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think back on my own experience. So I never suffered from anxiety, and when the pandemic was happening, I couldn't even be outside. I was very afraid. I don't know what was happening. Then I had a lot of near by me people, whether it was immediate family, that were hospitalized, or people that I knew that were losing loved ones.
Mhm.
And so it was a lot to take in. And on top of that, to have to deal with work, whatever that may look like. So it's almost like the personal and the professional were sort of like meshing in with each other. So
Mhm.
learning how to have that resilience and how to deal with that. So what I ended up doing was diving into exercise. Um, so I just wanted to be active. I didn't have access to the gym anymore. I tried to work out outside, and every person that passed by me, I was like, oh my God, now I'm affected. I don't know. A
Mhm.
lot of it was a lack of knowledge and understanding
Mhm.
of what that was and what the virus was.
Mhm.
But it was a lot of fear, right? A lot of fear. Everything was drastically changing. You don't know what was happening. We've never dealt with this before. And so for me, my sort of saving grace was the exercise.
Mhm.
And I was fortunate enough also to have friends in the neighborhood that I was able to meet up with and go for walks, be in the park. So for me, nature has always been very important. And my apartment, we don't get a lot of sunlight there. So I had
Mhm.
to go out and seek the sunlight, seek the fresh air, right?
Mhm.
So it took time, but again, it goes back to individual resiliency and go back to the
Mhm.
faith, right?
Mhm.
And knowing that no matter what was going on, you will see it through. So for me, that's really what got me through, just knowing that God got me,
Mhm.
and then doing what I could for my own mental health and wellness to be able to get through what may have been happening. And then that sort of let me leverage what was happening at work, because, as I mentioned, we weren't prepared. We didn't know what to do. We
Mhm.
didn't know what it was going to look like. Questions just kept coming. We did not have answers.
Mhm.
We didn't know how to handle it. And so as time went on, it got a little bit easier. But I would say even to this day, there are still things that we don't know. And so we
Mhm.
can only do what we can. And you could apply that to professional, you could apply that to personal, right? So
Mhm.
you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You could only go with your gut feeling. You could only go with what you know, whatever decision you need to make with what you have at the moment, and just hope and pray for the best, right? Um,
Yeah.
so I think that although there was a lot of suffering and losses that happened during the pandemic, I do think on the upside, a lot of beautiful things came out of it too.
Mhm.
For me, now that I think about it, I had a pandemic baby. Um,
Mhm.
so that was really definitely new thresholds in my life.
Mhm.
I never saw myself as a mom. I always said I don't want to have any kids. And then I
Mm.
saw myself sort of like changing that perspective. I
Mhm.
saw my friends having babies, how beautiful those babies are, the interaction, how amazing they are as moms. And I was like, you know what? I want that for myself.
Mhm.
And I sort of like prayed for God,
Mhm.
make me a mom. For some reason, I thought that I couldn't have children. Don't
Mhm.
ask me where I got that from. Totally made up,
Right.
right?
Right.
Um,
Mm.
Next thing you know, I'm like the fittest I've ever been. I'm super healthy.
Mhm.
And boom, I have a baby right
Yeah.
in the middle of a pandemic. And it's been the biggest blessing ever. So
Mhm.
talk about resiliency, right?
Mhm.
So it's been great. So we often associate the pandemic in such negative light, but I do think a lot of beautiful things also came out of it. And
Yeah.
so I think that that's usually a perspective that I try to have, how to focus on the positive, how to
Mm.
focus on the good things, that
Mhm.
different situations, even if they're hard and difficult, let's look
Mhm.
at the positive light of it and what can we draw good out of that,
Mhm.
to make sure that yes, we could go through hard moments, but what have we learned? What can we take away from it on a good positive light to keep that optimism going?
Yeah. Let's shift a little bit. Talk about your spiritual journey. You talked today about faith and God, and I love it because um, your faith has kept you, you know, keep going and reaching for
Hmm.
having that faith and your own relationship with God. Tell us about your spiritual journey.
Certainly. So I actually went to Catholic school. So I was born in the Dominican Republic, and I went to school very early on. So I remember having to wear the uniform, sort of doing the prayers and those things at the school at a very young age. My mom is very much a religious person. I think you could probably say that a lot of the Dominican culture, for the most part, is very heavy on Catholicism, and that's sort of like where I grew up. So your prayers, your different rosary that you do in the holy hour. That's how we call it. So if someone had passed, or if you're doing a remembrance, you sort of gather and get together and pray. So I had that growing up. But then when I went to college, I actually was introduced to Christianity. And so I recall that we had an individual on campus that used to drive a shuttle bus and take students to church to go to service and go to worship. And so for me, I never knew anything. To me, I've grew up Catholic. I thought that's what it was all about. And so I actually got baptized in a Christian church. And
Mhm.
so to me, the way that they spoke about the word, the way that they broke down the discussions, it was more in a relatable sense, and I felt very connected to it. So that definitely opened my mind to understand that there are many different religions, there are many different practices. And so I held on with that. I also had joined a fellowship for women. So BSF, that I got introduced by an amazing colleague of mine, and that was great. So you in fellowship with other women
Mhm.
practicing faith, and this is done globally. And so I was going to church on 60th and Park after work on Mondays. And then when the pandemic hit, we were doing it virtual. So that has been great. But to me, very early on, and I don't know when that occurred, it
Mhm.
was really ingrained in me that, you believe in God, you believe in the faith, you believe in that higher being, the higher power, and have that personal relationship, whether it is a church or not. Um, whether it's a place of worship or not, is really whenever you want it, is always accessible and available to you. So that's sort of like how I grew up. And so whenever I'm going through a tough time, I sort of connect to that.
Mhm.
Nature is also very big for me. So yes, prayer is definitely one of my go-to, but also grounding myself with nature. So
Mhm.
spending time at the park, the sun, getting revitalized in that sense as well. I know a lot of my friends do mantras, which I think also help. And so also reminding yourself what you want that mantra, what you're looking to have out of that. Um, for some reason, some people do think that astrology goes against religion.
Mhm.
But I also think that there is a lot that we could learn from astrology as well. And so all is interconnected with the planets, right? And
Mhm.
science and the creation that came from day one. And so I
Mhm.
think it really just depends on individual preference and what you believe in. For
Mhm.
me, I just think that my relationship with God is really what has helped me through. And in addition to that, you do have certain practices that you may see. So I just laughed, for New Year's, we always do the luggage out the door, or you might wear a certain color to bring sort of like high vibration. So it really goes back to what are your intentions and what it is that you want to do. But for me, I think it really, I just go with the flow and go with what I feel at the moment. If there's a particular practice that I see online or someone has shared and I connect with, then I do that. But it goes back to the walking by faith and trusting in that relationship that no matter what, you will always be taken care of.
That's pretty good. And I know you had, I generally say, so what are your top three go-to practices? Because I talk about the spiritual toolkit. We
Mm-hmm.
always talk about having these tools that are available, right? So I always talk about, well, what's in your spiritual toolkit? So we get to talk about, and as I think you've mentioned, what would be your top three go-to practices?
So for me, one is gratitude.
Good.
So within gratitude, that has always allowed me to access basically everything. And it goes back again for me personally, being grateful for the blessings that I have. And also asking for more blessings, right? Whatever I may need in that particular moment in time. But gratitude always provides me access. Prayer, as I
Mm,
mentioned before, prayer is very important, and it's prayer of thanks, prayer of request, prayers for other people, right? And so I always love when I have friends that may have said, "Oh, I'll do a little prayer for you," or I send positivity over your life. And so I always remind myself, praying for other people is also important. And so you don't have to let that person know, but if you know, or if it comes to my heart, there are times where I specifically pray for people without knowing what they're going through or whatever. And so I feel a connection with that. And then I also have a very active dreams, right?
mm,
So my dreams as well, I think I get a lot of messages from that. Sometimes they're hard to decipher,
mm,
but I think there is a lot to be said in your subconscious and what you remember and what you dream about. And so there's times where I've dreamt of people, and then the next day they reach out to me or something happens. And it's like, oh my gosh, I saw that in my dream. So
mm,
also paying attention to um, what dreams I'm having, and making sure that before I go to bed, I'm not watching like a scary movie or something too crazy. So
mm,
being at peace, trying to have like that serenity and that time with yourself.
mm,
So for me, before I became a mom, I always used to sort of have a little routine. I'll take a shower, I light the candles, I put the soothing music. Now I kind of don't have that much anymore.
mhm.
I can't even use the bathroom at times without thinking of or having a crying child on the other side. But I
Mhm,
think it still goes back to, yes, those are the nice haves, but it's really just taking that moment to be with yourself, with your thoughts, sort of like gather. A lot of times we're on the go, 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 and we don't take a time to sort of digest what has happened
mhm,
or think of the next day and what may be coming on. So it's just having that peaceful time with yourself to sort of reflect and decompress, so to speak,
mhm,
right? So
mhm,
decompress. So those I would say are my top three.
mhm. What I know you mentioned being a mom. What would you say has been your biggest shift now that you're a mom?
I think my time is not my own anymore, to be honest with
Mm,
you, right? And
mm,
so I have a great support system.
mm,
I definitely do. So it's not as if I need to do something, I don't have the help, but I also want to be there for my child, right? I want to enjoy as he's growing. I have a little boy. Um and being more intentional about what I say yes to. So before, I mean, I was always very active. So I
mhm,
will always sort of like on the whim, oh yeah, I want to go here, I want to go there, or let's get together, let's do this, let's do that. Now I have to plan, right? So I could
mm,
still go out, I could still do those things, but now I have to plan around, what is his schedule? When is he napping?
mhm,
Or what are my village doing that I'll be able to go and have fun or do what I need to do. And I've incorporated him in a lot of what I do now anyway. So I love going to the parks when the weather is nice. I take him with me. So
Mhm.
I might not be able to stay out as late, but we do get to enjoy nature together. And so that
Mhm.
has been the biggest shift, just how I'm allocating my time and what I'm using that time for. Where it might seem a little bit limited, but honestly, I really don't feel like I'm missing out on much. It's just
Mhm.
maybe the times that I'm free to do things might not be as convenient as they were before,
Mhm.
but definitely the time is there.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you mentioned. I think I've seen where you plan events or you was inviting us to do karaoke, right?
Yes, that's actually coming on Thursday. So,
Mhm.
when I was pregnant, I sort of took a step back because we were still in the pandemic. So you have
Mhm.
to take care of your health, you have to take care of you. So I wasn't necessarily socializing as much as I would have, if we didn't have a virus going on. And
Mhm.
so after I gave birth, I did do a gathering. I think it was like a happy hour in the neighborhood, and I got to see some people that I hadn't seen in a while. So like you said, some people from Momentum, some people that I grew up with, some people I went to high school with, college. And so everybody had a great time. So they were like, oh, you should do these more often. And
Mhm.
I did say that I would, but I kind of didn't. Like the year just took a whole beast on its own. And so I want to bring that back for this year. So I love getting people together. I love doing fun outings where people could just enjoy each other's company. And I have amazing friends and family. So I always like to do fun things, right? So share the joy. And so on Thursday, I'm getting together to do karaoke, which I've been talking about for quite some time. So I'm very excited for it.
That sounds really good. So we are actually coming to a close, and I'd like to give you, just some time to share whatever you'd like to share. The idea is, I always say, supporting people in accessing joy, resources available to them. Um, your story inspires others, right? So it's really great that you have been able to share and be on the show. So I will give you this moment to say whatever, right?
Well, thank you so much for having me here. I think the key message that I want the viewers and listeners to walk away with is that 2023 is our year, because I'm
Mm,
including myself in there, right? And
mhm,
so you get to create what you want to create with intention. And I was just sharing with you earlier that I did a vision board. And
mhm,
so my sister had us basically do virtual vision boards, which I've never done before, right? I've always done the old school magazine clipping.
right.
And we actually included our my niece, who's 12 years old.
Mhm,
And it was very inspiring to see how, um, if we allow our hearts to talk, our spirit to come through, our imagination to soar, what we're able to create. So my niece's board was just amazing.
mhm,
Um, and so in my board, I really talked about, getting a new home. I've
mhm,
been wanting to transition into a new household, traveling, back to wellness, and well being, my son, who is my purpose, and just being able to attract all that positivity, the love, the abundance into our lives. So I would say allow yourself to dream.
mhm,
And do a vision board. If you've never done it, maybe try something new. If you've done it before, be open, and trust what may come to you. And it
mhm,
doesn't matter whether it is with the magazine clip outs or if it is virtual, but the idea is to connect with your goals and connect with your spirit. And so a word that came from me for 2023 is vibrant. And so that's what I want to have, vibrancy. So I want to bring that into my life. I want to continue to celebrate it. And so that would give me access to many different things. And pick a word for you. So think of a word. Let that be sort of your guide, your motivation. Or if you want more than one word, you could do that too. And sort of map out what your goals are. I know that some people believe in manifestation. And so I do think that it is a great reminder of what is accessible and what
mhm.
you want to have. And so just don't be afraid, right?
Yeah.
Boldly step into the what's next, whatever that may be in whatever area of your life, and believe. Because the more that we believe, the more that we have positive thoughts, positive practices, and affirmations the closer that we get to the goals. And it's really just a matter of believing and then going out there and doing what you need to do to align with what you said you get to have.
Yes. Well, thank you. It's been really, really great having you as a guest tonight. And good luck with everything you're doing. And I know I'll see you in the community and all the
Yes.
best with that little baby boy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So we will definitely be in touch.
For sure.
Thank you for joining me tonight on Conversations with Reverend G. I'm here every Monday night with guests from all walks of life. We talk about life, we talk about love, and we talk about spirituality. And we talk about it from a practical point of view. How does it support you in your everyday life? What practices are your go to practices? I am here always looking to support you in accessing the joy in your life, in living your best life with grace and ease. You can find me every day with inspirational messages on Facebook as Reverend Grenetta Mason and on Instagram as Rev Grenetta. I invite you to live your best life and in peace and in joy, and to find those practices that support you in doing so. Have a great, great week, and I'll see you again right here next week live, WEMS Radio, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, and on the WEMS Radio app. See you again next week, 8 p.m. Bye.